This is a picture from my thesis, and the name I gave it is Look Within, which is what our reading is about today. And it would have been a temple where you have this oculus in the middle of it that looks down and throws light inside, like in your mind, in your brain, and in the interior of your consciousness, as opposed to scattering it all over the place and hoping it'll land in a fertile location. The most fertile location that any light can land is within you. But we're afraid to do that. I just introduced the topic. The Holy Spirit
Fantastic.
will never teach you that you are sinful. It might just be the biggest error in conventional Christianity. Errors the Holy Spirit will correct, but correction of errors makes no one fearful. You're indeed afraid to look within and see the sin you think is there inside you, something that was probably meaningless to everybody else, but scares you. This fear of searching within ourselves to see sin, you would not be fearful to admit. Fear in association with sin, the ego deems quite appropriate and smiles approvingly. The ego has no fear to let you feel ashamed. The ego doubts not your belief and faith in sin. The ego's temples do not shake because of your belief and faith in sin. Your faith that sin is there, but witnesses to your desire that sin be there to see. Your belief and faith in sin merely seems to be the source of fear.
The ego wants us to believe that we are sinful. Sin requires punishment, and since the ego tells us our existence is based on sin, we should be fearful of the wrath of God. If we hadn't sinned, we wouldn't have anything to fear. The Holy Spirit tells us we're sinless and guiltless. We've made mistakes, but these errors only require correction, not punishment. If we were to look within ourselves and find no sin, a major premise of the egoic thought system would be shown to be false. Without sin, our belief and need for egoic protection would cease.
Remember that the ego is not alone. The ego's rule is tempered, and the ego's unknown enemy, the Christ, which is the home of the Holy Spirit, whom the ego cannot see, the ego fears. Loudly, the ego tells you not to look inward, for if you do, your eyes will light on sin and God will strike you blind. You believe sin is within you, and so you do not look within you. Yet this belief, sentence 4 is just one of those really simple, obvious sentences once you've read it and said it and read it. But it's very powerful.
I already know what's inside of me, so I don't have to look, right?
Right, exactly. And so you live in fear. Yet this belief that if you look within, you will find sin is not the ego's hidden fear, nor yours who serve the ego. Loudly, indeed, the ego claims sin is within you too loudly and too often. For underneath this constant shout and frantic proclamation that sin is within us, the ego is not certain it is so. Beneath your fear to look within because of sin is yet another egoic fear, and one which makes the ego tremble.
We're told by the ego that we're sinners. We accept and believe this. Our world is a sinful place. The ego tells us, however, that although we have sinned, we are actually victims. and that we should blame the outside, sinful world for our own sins. They're doing it, they started it, right?
Yep.
The outside world caused us to sin, and therefore sin is not our fault. Well, that would really suck if that was the truth, because then we really would be victims.
Exactly.
Yet the greatest fear for the ego is the thought that if we looked within, we might not find sin. That house of cards will fall down. If there's no sin in us, we don't have any reason to fear God. The logic for our fear of God would be gone. The revengeful God of the ego would disappear, and with it, ego's purpose for existence would be gone. We would no longer need the ego to defend us from a God that loves us, the God of love.
What if you looked within and saw no sin? This fearful question is one the ego never asks. And you who ask the ego this question about the existence of sin within us now are threatening the ego's whole defensive system too seriously, too seriously for the ego to bother to pretend that the ego is your friend. Those who have joined their brothers have detached themselves from their belief that their identity lies in the ego. A holy relationship is one in which you join with what is part of you in truth, the Christ. And your belief in sin has been already shaken, nor are you now entirely unwilling to look within you and, and not see sin.
When we've experienced the miracle of the holy relationship, we've looked at our brother and we've seen a reason to forgive. We did not find any sin in our brother that was beyond forgiveness or required punishment. If our brother has not sinned, it is possible that there. If our brother has not sinned, is it possible that there's no sin within us? The ego's special relationship, which is based on sin and lack, have been found wanting. The egoic special relationship has been transformed by the Holy Spirit into a holy relationship. This transformation demonstrates that forgiveness and joining is possible and that love is more powerful than fear. That's something for me to remember too. Love is more powerful than fear. We've begun to realize that there might be a better way, and perhaps we should question the advice of that little tiny ego.
Right now, there's a discussion going on about white exception, no, white privilege. And it's really the Black people, the Black race, the Black folks, African Americans looking at life as it is and knowing that they can't even walk down the street sometimes, depending on where they live, without worrying about some idiot who is white just looking at their body and assuming that they're bad and that they have to be destroyed. The idea of white privilege is a very sick, distorted, egocentric problem that if people would just realize that there are so many misunderstandings about what life really is, it would be a lot easier for them to love. This material we're reading right now is just one of many things in Course in Miracles. It helps us get our thinking straight because it's all about our thinking and understanding these principles. Okay, your liberation still is only partial, still limited and incomplete, yet born within you. Not wholly mad, you have been willing to look on much of your insanity and recognize the egoic thought system's madness. Your faith is moving inward, past insanity and on to reason. Carry that football across the goal. And what your reason tells you now, the ego would not hear. The Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind, the Christ consciousness, the ego knows not of. No more did you know that the Christ was within you. And yet, this part, the Christ, with which you now identify, is not afraid to look upon itself. The Christ knows no sin. How otherwise could the Christ consciousness part of your mind have been willing to see the Holy Spirit's purpose as the Christ consciousness's own purpose?
The egoic special relationship, now made holy, has become the means for rediscovery of the Christ consciousness part of our mind. This Christ consciousness has always been within our mind, but has been kept silent by the ego's thought system. By asking for guidance from the Holy Spirit, we will begin to hear the voice or call for the remembrance of God that is always within us. Have a wonderful day.
Talk to you soon. Bye.